this plate right next to your machine. And there are two holes, so you're going to go through both. Go through one, loop back around the other side, and then go through the next one. And then the first thing you're going to do when you're going through this disc is go through the hole on the side and then slot it inwards. So I'm going to go through this hole on the side. And same as the cover stitch, some of these machines take 3 threads, some of them take 4, some of them take 5. It just varies the width of the serging stitch. And the same with the cover stitch. If you were to thread it with 5 stitches, you would, instead of having the 2 parallel lines running along the top, have a bunch of stitches that go in between the 2. So if that's something that you want, that's a decorative stitch that you see a lot on a lot of knitwear, then you just have to add in the extra threads. So now I'm just going through the metal plate underneath the disc. And now you go over to the side and you have this little lever that moves from side to side, and you have 2 holes on either side of this lever that you have to go through. This is where my tweezers come in handy. So now I'm going between this thing that moves from side to side, but there's nothing to thread, it's just a space that my thread needs to go through. And then there's a hole on the other side that you want to go through as well. So I'm going to push this out of the way so that it's easier to thread. Not that much easier, but a little bit easier. And now it just sits within that space. And now we're just going to go through the hole right above our needle and go through our needle. So I'm going to lift this wheel up, and this lever will take our foot and displace it and put it back into place. So if I lift this and push this out of the way, now it's much easier for me to thread my needle. So I'm going to go through these 2 little slots right above here and then go through the needle. One, and then it usually just finds its way in between those 2. I'll grab my tweezers. And then again, I will thread my needle from front to back because my needle is facing me. through these two holes here. Go through one, go back to the other side. Go through another. And I'll go through the two holes on either side of this disc and slot my thread into the disc. Like this. And now we go into this part. So here's our diagram right here. So if you ever get confused, you can always reference this diagram. And the way that we enter the underneath part is by going through this hole here. And similarly to threading the needle underneath the cover stitch, it's kind of like a long little cave that you have to go through, where you just sort of like dip your fabric in through the top and keep nudging it down until it shows up in the bottom. Right there. Then you're going to go behind this metal bar, and the first one you're going to go through is this little hole. If you look closely, you'll also see all of these colored dots on the inside of your cover stitch machine. And those correspond to these dots here, here, and here. So if you just try to find the dot that corresponds with the color on the spindle, you'll always know which thread goes where. So I'm threading this yellow one right here, so I'm just going to go through all of the yellow dots. So this is the first one. And next, I have to go through this one. That's the next yellow dot. So first, I'm going through this hole right here. It's helpful to have a lot of light when you're doing this, so hopefully you guys can see more of what I'm doing. So I've got my thread through the first hole. I want to make sure it's not getting caught on anything. And then next I have to go through this one from front to back. So, like that. Yep, come back. And then next there's this one. You can see the yellow dot right there. You can also push this lever, and that will put that out of the way, because sometimes it just gets in the way of your hands. So you just go through there. And now we go through here. That's my next yellow dot. So again, from front to back. And then I'll just pick up my thread from the other side, like that. And now we can start to go through our needle. This machine is really insanely, ridiculously dusty, and it's really gross and hard to tell what's going on. Sorry. It's just fabric shards. It's not anything that's going to kill you. But, yeah, sometimes you want to get rid of some of it so that you can see what the hell is going on in there. And then I just have to go through the tip of the needle right here, same as before, from front to back. And then I'll just go in between with my tweezers and grab it. Like that. Oh, sorry. So now that one's threaded, so we just have one more to go. So, I've got my green thread. Now we're just going through all of the blue dots underneath. And next we find our blue dots. So here is our first blue dot. We're threading this little hole downwards. And our next blue dot is right here. So we're threading this from there to there. Like that. Where is our next blue dot? Our next blue dot is right here. So that means that we want to go through this hole right here. From front to back, like that. And then, I think it's time for us to thread our second needle. So this one is similar to the one that's on our cover stitch machine, but it's like a little zigzag instead of it being just one piece. There's a hole here, and then there's a hole back here, and then you go back through here. So, I'll show you what I need. The first thing we want to do is just go from front to back through the first hole. Like this. So now our thread is kind of somewhere in here. This is the part where you really need tweezers, because you have to go behind this hole in through here and pull that thread out to the other side. But now I'm going to push this needle over to this side, and now I can see my other hole, which is right here. This part never really, no matter how much you crank this, works its way far enough over to this side for you to be able to thread it from over here. So that's why you have to work your thread in through this space and over to the other side. And since I threaded this from front to back, I'm threading this from back to front so that I can see my thread coming towards me. So I can see this hole right here. And I'll just thread it from back to front, like this. And now, I can push my needle this way and push my thread underneath again through here. and then thread this from front to back again because I came back to the front. The last one. And then my machine will be threaded. Yep. So now all of my threads are in my machine. And I'm going to go ahead and test it out to make sure that nothing is in my way. This is often much smaller than unwoven garments. That's all dependent on the type of finish that you want on the inside. This is a very, very narrow stitch. This is actually a purl stitch. And so what that would mean is that the seam allowance on your garment would only be about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. But sometimes if the serging is thicker, then you want maybe 3/8 of an inch. I want to iron it like this, so it's folded. And this is the face of my garment, and this is the surface of this. If I want this to work its way around a neckline without being super wobbly and strange, because you want it to curl inwards, I'm gonna be pulling this while I'm sewing it and not doing anything to the neckline. And you kind of want to just sort of, this takes practice. You want to try this a couple of times, I would say, in order to feel just how much you want to pull something, depending on the curve. So if something is really sharp in terms of the curve, you want to pull it more. If it's gradual, you want to pull it less. You don't want to pull it too much because sometimes that can cause puckering, but you also don't want to pull it not enough because then it will be loose. So for something like this, you can see I'm just spreading this knit out a little bit more and gently pulling it with my fingers to make it work its way around the curve.